Sun, Martina Bett, and journalist Benjamin Butterworth. So welcome back to both of you.
Good morning.
And Ben, you're kicking off this hour with the front page of the Sunday Times and rather unhelpful article from a, well, I say unhelpful to Keir Starmer, and the whole book not necessarily that flattering.
Yeah, so two of their political reporters have been writing a book on the rise of Starmer since, I think, 2017 it goes back, so when he was Shadow Brexit Secretary. And it's quite amazing as an insight to him. It says that Morgan McSweeney, who's the architect of Labour's victory, he's the sort of Mandelson of this age, was fatalistic about his prospects. In 2021, he said that he thought he was going to fail. That was after they lost the Hartlepool by-election, which some geeks might remember. And he said that it's like working with an HR manager. Keir Starmer apparently told one MP there is no such thing as Starmerism, and there never will be. And it's interesting to hear these reflections on the past couple of years, because later in the piece it talks about how in these first 100 days Labour really stumbled. It didn't seem to have the clear direction, the clear narrative. It didn't manage crises because it didn't seem to have a centre to its goal. And is this what's coming to play out? You know, that he doesn't have an idea of why he's in power. Apparently, when he first met in March 2019 to plan his leadership bid, he got someone else to chair the meeting. He took notes on it rather than leading it. And then there are other claims. He got an actress, a Shakespearean actress, to train him to be less wooden.
Doesn't that happen quite a lot? I mean,
think it does.
In terms of people being trained to make their public performances more slick.
I mean, I've had extensive training for this, for example. But, I mean,
you can tell,
the jury is out on whether it worked. But it's absolutely fascinating. And then, when there was the lockdown row, when it looked like he might, when he said, I'll resign if I'm guilty, Rachel Reeves, now the Chancellor, Wes Streeting, now the Health Secretary, were both preparing leadership bids if he was to fall.
Yeah, and I think it's a very interesting question because, as we can tell, he doesn't have that many close friends, or like close friends, but they all had doubts about him. Of course, this was after the Hartlepool by-election, and Starmer himself thought that he wanted to resign and then was convinced not to do so. But it's just interesting to see how he even himself was opposed to define himself. And as Benjamin said, that there's no thing as Starmerism, because I think that's the thing that he's struggling with at the moment.
What's setting out a vision to inspire
setting out
people?
Vision and like his lack of political nous as well. You know, one of the biggest criticism that is coming now is the fact that he's not been able to set out his growth plan. That at the beginning, and you could say that that was the Chancellor's problem, the Chancellor's fault as well. But you know, they've been very horrible about the economy and the state of the British state. That then the economy is not doing very well, and they fail to set out their growth plan. So you could argue that that political nous is lacking.
Well, yeah, and yet he might argue, he might say, I've got lots of friends, thank you very much, but he also might say, you know, I've just managed to get Labour this, you could describe it as a landslide. It was a convincing victory at the general election.
Yeah.
And I've also been dealt a pretty rough hand in terms of the economic legacy that's been handed to me, so there's not much that I can do.
Well, I think those things are true, but there's a quote in this that says that he thinks he's driving the train, but actually we've just put him at the front of the DLR, meaning the Docklands Light Railway, which doesn't have a driver, it's automated. And so that's pretty damning from someone in his inner circle.
Yeah, it's the fact that it's from people so close to him.
That the advisors are running the show and not him. Now, maybe they're competent, but I think even though this is about past years, I think this tells us a lot about what's going to happen in the coming years.
Yeah, really interesting. So that'll make an interesting read. Martina, take us to an article inside the Sunday Telegraph now, and this is the continuing row over the Chagos Islands.
Over the Chagos Island, that's right. So the Foreign Secretary is finally going to talk to Marco Rubio's counterpart in the US about the Chagos Islands. And we know that Marco Rubio has actually been quite critical over the deal because he thinks that it might give China a foothold in the Indo-Pacific, because under the deal, the UK and the US would retain the military base in Diego Garcia on a lease for 99 years. But there are, of course, concerns that the Chinese might spy on this base. So it will be interesting to see how it develops, because Trump has not said anything about this deal yet. We just know people around him have been quite vocal about it, but we've not heard anything on the record. Because, you know, if he does end up blocking it, first of all, it could strain the relationship between the UK and the US, but it could also reinforce this perception that Britain cannot do foreign policy without the US. So it'll be very interesting to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, and UK officials saying that the deal was struck with the support of America, but obviously that was the previous administration anyway. So,
and it was with the previous administration in the Mauritius as well, because what happened was that the deal was struck in October, and then in December Mauritius had elections, and the new leader basically rejected the deal as well. So there have been loads of problems with this.
Yeah. Let's talk about a completely different issue. This is inside the Sunday Express.
It's interesting.
Talk us through it. It's about whether or not people with ginger hair should have protections. It's a question that's been raised.
Yeah, so a Labour MP who doesn't have ginger hair, but one of his constituents had talked about the horrendous abuse that they'd had for being ginger. They talked about a child being bullied terribly. There's a quote here, "It's a slur that's often overlooked by teachers." And so this Labour MP has raised the constituents' question and said, should we extend equality legislation to ginger hair in the way that race, sexuality, disability are protected by law? So if you make an abusive comment, there's an additional discipline, an additional punishment to prevent that being likely to happen. And should we extend that to people with red hair? Because, you know, we've all been to school. It certainly is a point of bullying that some people face. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, because then where do we draw the line, right? So, like, do people with acne could be falling under the scope of the equalities legislation as well? I'm sure that lots of people will come out and say, well, I think this person with that characteristic should fall under it. So it's an interesting question.
Yeah, exactly. We shall leave that hanging in the air and let people think about it at home. We've got 30 seconds. Can we talk about the Star and Sickies? Or not. Here's the headline. I can't come to work, boss. The weather's twisted my melon. They're talking about storm chaos giving people headaches.
Exactly, giving people migraines, in fact. I feel like storms aren't new to 2025, so if you're going to get a migraine, which is an awful thing to get, it's probably not changed in this year, I think. So I think some people might want February off.
Yeah.
I'll take February off.
So will I.
Actually, I won't. I will be back next week. But Martina and Benjamin, good to have your company. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance.